Today we're going to be looking at another one of Kurzgesagt's videos. Specifically this one called Smoking is Awesome. Well, as someone who lost his father to lung cancer when I was 12, I can't help but feel a little triggered by this title. And he didn't even smoke. No cigarettes. Anyway, just thought I'd say that in the spirit of self-awareness. And I'm aware that awesome can have several definitions. Smoking's also radioactive. Let's see what they mean by this. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Folse. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry, from engineering to operations to emergency response. I don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge.
The problem with smoking is that it's kind of amazing. This is an irresponsible thing to say, but if we're going to talk about it, we might as well do so honestly. Smoking creates a temporary problem and offers an instant solution. Once your brain is used to nicotine, for up to 72 hours you're itchy, nervous.
Man, that thing is terrifying looking. I know they did this on purpose, and I had a feeling there would be a hook like this. I figured a channel as popular as this isn't promoting smoking.
And stressed. But one drag and instantly you feel really good. But it's way more than just a physical addiction. Smoking helps you focus at work and is an excuse to take regular breaks, which is good for you mentally.
What's crazy is there used to be breaks that only smokers can have. I'm not aware of any place like this today that has that. Now it's just a break, whether you use it to smoke or do anything else. But I do remember hearing about this a while ago, that people would take up smoking just to be able to take that 10 or 15 minute break. Let me know if you're aware of it still existing, that you have to be a smoker to take that sort of break if you work in any environment like that. I never did, but I've heard about it.
It's a tool against boredom, it suppresses your appetite, it makes bad moments feel less bad and good moments better. It's social, fun together, and a good way to make friends, as smokers always group up. Your lip.
I remember growing up within the US, there were whole sections of restaurants that were dedicated to smoking versus non-smoking, and a lot of times they weren't even well sectioned off, that sometimes you would sit in the non-smoking section and be downwind of the smoking section. Of course, most places in the US, you can't do that.
So one of the most sensitive parts of your body, and putting something between them is deeply satisfying.
I see what they did there. Okay.
So now that we've given smoking an honest introduction, let's smoke a cigarette together to see why it makes you feel so good and what exactly happens inside your body when you do it. The best worst thing. A cigarette is dried tobacco leaves mixed with chemicals that make it burn slowly, helping you to absorb nicotine and flavors that make the smoke less harsh. Let's light it.
This background music is giving me the weirdest vibe.
Cigarette smoke is 95% gases like carbon dioxide and water vapor. The remaining 5% are particles called tar, and they contain the magic sauce, carbon or nitrogen compounds filled with nicotine. As you inhale, billions of particles interact with everything they pass through, getting stuck on your throat, tongue and trachea. Your lungs are like big inflatable sponges and have a filter and barrier. The cilia cells with hair-like extensions covered by a layer of mucus. They trap dust or bacteria to be swept away in a sort of dance. Tar particles land in the mucus and turn into a sticky brown substance that stops the dance and paralyzes the cilia, allowing them to get deeper into your lungs to the alveoli.
So all of this particulate matter is entering your lungs, critical areas of the body, and it's radioactive. So this is lead-210 and polonium-210 inside the body. Lead-210 undergoes beta decay, which has a half-life of 22 years, and polonium-210 undergoes alpha decay, and has a half-life of 138 days. So these things are going to be giving you internal dose. Now, alpha and beta particles typically aren't that much of a hazard outside the body, and you get this straight from the tobacco leaves. It's found naturally in the soil and in the air, not to mention high phosphate fertilizers that farmers use on their crops. So it's straight from the leaf and primarily an internal hazard. So the farmers producing tobacco in the crops, unless they smoke it, they're not really subject to a significant radiological hazard, but smoking enough cigarettes is also a radiological hazard that a lot of people do not realize. There's a lot of nasty stuff in cigarettes.
Alveoli are little air sacs, and here's where your actual breathing happens. They have very thin walls so that oxygen can transfer to your blood and carbon dioxide can leave.
And it's within this tar, so all these very thin systems that are very critical for breathing. Alpha particles are very short range, but they transfer a lot of energy over that short range. Betas are considerably less energy is translated, but it does have a longer range. And both of those are less of a hazard when they're outside of the body. But all these susceptible internal systems that have a lot of surface area in particular, that's a problem.
Now the magic is released. Nicotine passes through the thin walls and enters your bloodstream, reaching your brain so fast that it feels instant. The positive effect arrives right away. If your brain had a control board, smoking would be like pressing all the buttons at once, releasing loads of transmitters and hormones that affect your whole body.
As a former reactor operator, I can say with confidence that I do not recommend pressing all the buttons at once. In all likelihood, since a lot of those buttons are safety systems, you're just going to shut down your reactor.
Epinephrine and cortisol make your heart beat faster and your body ready for action. Dopamine makes you feel happy and relaxed and reduces your appetite.
These animations are crazy.
Beta endorphins reduce pain and stress. Nicotine excites and calms you at the same time. You become more alert and able to focus, your nerves become more sensitive to pleasant sensations, then your whole body relaxes. Together, all of these effects just feel great. But your brain immediately tries to return to normal and pushes back against the effects of nicotine, which is fine as long as you have nicotine inside your blood, but once its effects wear off...
These brain pictures are the stuff of nightmares, by the way.
Your body is left overcompensating, creating a massive imbalance within itself. The more you smoke, the harder your body tries to push back, which is why nicotine is so addictive. You stop feeling like yourself without it. It's still great, but now you also need it just to feel normal. If that was all smoking did, well, that would be kind of okay. Nicotine comes with thousands of different chemical buddies.
Oh, here we go.
Cadmium, lead, arsenic, and cyanide.
You mentioned the lead, which has some radioactivity, and also it's poisonous. I mean, arsenic's poisonous.
Hydrogen peroxide or nitrogen oxides cause damage wherever they end up. Carbon monoxide reduces how much oxygen your blood can carry.
Not to mention, some of these are actually greenhouse gases. Nitrogen oxide, I mean, it's not a significant amount, but still, it's interesting.
In your lungs, your cilia cells struggle. It's hard to push mucus clogged up with tar, and some of your cilia cells die. Your alveoli are super sensitive and can't handle this sort of stress.
They're being pretty goofy, like silly and ravioli. Yeah.
A few of your tiny air sacs pop like balloons, causing irreparable damage. Your body needs to get rid of all this tar immediately. Goblet cells pump out extra mucus to compensate, which makes breathing harder, so you start coughing.
Not an expert on cell structure, but I've never heard of goblet cells.
To get the tar and mucus out. Your immune system activates and macrophages begin eating up tar particles. Smokers have way more of these cleanup cells here because their lungs are literally full of dirt. But the nicotine makes the macrophages sluggish and inefficient. Worse, they vomit chemicals that dissolve your lung tissue and cause tiny wounds that turn into scar tissue.
This is a vicious cycle. I mean, and it's making your systems unstable. It's basically turning your body into Chernobyl, except it's a very slow, decaying way to go instead of an explosion. But instabilities and these vicious cycles that can put you on a spiral, that's giving you a personal Chernobyl.
Scars in your lungs are bad if you like breathing.
If you like breathing.
Nicotine raises your heart rate while ordering blood vessels all over your body to constrict. Meanwhile, toxic chemicals get stuck, causing countless tiny wounds all over your body that will turn into scars. Those scars leak proteins that create random blood clots, making your blood vessels even narrower. Constricted and narrow vessels put a lot of stress on your heart muscle that has to work much harder to keep blood flowing.
Yeah, it does, because you just don't have, you're having clogged conduits. I mean, you can kind of relate the human body to a nuclear plant, and that you gotta keep your power and flow parameters in band. You gotta have the right chemistry, chemical makeup. It's an interesting thought experiment anyway. The human body is actually more complicated than a nuclear power plant in terms of how many subsystems. They're close. They're close.
Inside your skin, the chemicals trigger enzymes that break down collagen, the protein that makes your skin elastic and smooth. This creates folds and wrinkles. Your skin ages much quicker, and you look older sooner. But maybe the worst thing...
Yeah, I've seen that. Smoking can turn you into a pretty high mileage individual.
What happens to your immune system? All over your body it reacts to tiny wounds and activates, fighting an invisible enemy, damaging healthy cells in the process. While at the same time, the nicotine makes it slow and sluggish. Worse at fighting actual diseases. We could go on like this, but this is getting old.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, every single one of your organs is highly stressed and suffers some kind of permanent damage.
Oh, the irony, because a lot of people turn to smoking to reduce stress. So one other thing I did want to bring up, because I've seen various postings and people have shared with me, thank you very much for sharing them, about smoking giving you a higher radioactive dose than Chernobyl, than the Chernobyl liquidators. So does it give you a higher dose? Well, it depends. Depends what your job was. Because a lot of the liquidators didn't really come into contact with that many hot particles. They were essentially just moving dirt and doing it for a very limited period of time. Now, there were the extreme ones. There were the cases of people that got lethal acute radiation poisoning. Obviously, smoking doesn't get you nearly that level. And not even the level of the people that had the very hot jobs on, say, the roofs, getting all the graphite off, where people got a sievert of dose, not millisieverts or microsieverts, but a full sievert, enough to cause mild acute radiation poisoning. Note that when I say mild, I just mean you're going to live and you're going to recover eventually, but there's still horrific nausea, anemia, vomiting, really nasty symptoms. So even when I use the term mild, that just means you're going to live. It's still horrible. So no, smoking's not going to give you that much of a dose. So sources actually vary widely. Lowballing it, a pack of 20 is about 1 microsievert. So if you have a pack a day, that figures out to 365 microsieverts a year, which actually exceeds the annual release limit of nuclear power plants. That one's only 250 microsieverts per year. So it's a lot. Well, kind of. Within the US, release limits are super, super harsh. Like if you subjected coal or natural gas plants to that limit, they would have to make all kinds of crazy modifications, because that's a very low dose for an entire facility. And 360 microsieverts, depending on where you live, that's about what your background radiation is. So you're essentially getting twice the background dose. Now that can vary pretty widely. A lot of it kind of depends where you live relative to a natural uranium deposit or something, how much sunlight you get, that sort of thing. It's also equivalent to about 4 or 5 chest x-rays. But here's the difference, is it's targeted. It's not average throughout your whole body where it's nice and neat and diffused. It's going straight to very vulnerable organs. So you're getting some nasty targeted radiation dose to your lungs, but you're not getting a massive amount like a sievert that's going to give you acute radiation poisoning. However, that is just the low ball. There are higher estimates, because each cigarette, it kind of depends where you get your tobacco from as far as how much polonium and lead is within the tobacco leaves. There is another estimate that is 36,000 microsieverts for a pack and a half a day. I'll put my sources in the description, which the annual dose limit for a member of the public is 1,000. It's 50,000 for radiation workers, people that work at nuclear power plants, labs, anything where you're trained on handling radioactive material. Again, not nearly as much as the most extreme examples of Chernobyl, though one thing I will add is smoking, very popular in the Soviet Union in the 1980s. So some of these Chernobyl workers are smoking on top of their high dose jobs, so they're getting even more dose. Now, with all that said, as far as the damage smoking does to you, the radiation is really the icing on the cake. Odds are you're going to die of lung cancer and all heart disease, all these other adverse smoking effects before you get acute radiation sickness from smoking. But it's certainly another reason to not smoke, in that you're giving yourself nasty internal dose, plus with secondhand smoking, you're also spreading the potential for more internal doses for people that inhale the smoke. So if you're looking to quit, or you have a buddy who's looking to quit, remind them that it's radioactive.
Over time, fats get stuck in the scars inside blood vessels, which get narrower and narrower until they start to suffocate your organs. Your overworked heart beats even harder to push blood through the extra resistance, and your blood pressure rises. So hard that fluids seep out of blood vessels into your lungs, which makes breathing even harder. The likelihood of a blood clot blocking a critical passage in the body rises enormously.
And I guess the Chernobyl event would be the heart attack, stroke, blood clots that would lead to those things. There you go.
Which can eventually cause a heart attack or a stroke. Almost all smokers eventually get chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So many of your alveoli are irreversibly destroyed that you're always short of breath, never able to breathe freely. Once you have it, it can only get worse, never better again.
These symptoms are also consistent, though, with, well, in terms of level of severity that you could get from acute radiation sickness, in that, now that one involves a lot more bleeding and your body to heal improperly. So if you had both, then it mentioned the body already struggling to heal itself, but if you take that away with radiation poisoning, then it just becomes impossible.
Finally, there's cancer.
Yeah.
You get a sort of double whammy. On the one hand, you flood your whole system, and especially your lungs, with at least 70 highly cancer-causing chemicals. And on the other hand, you paralyze the part of your immune system that kills and prevents cancer.
Yep.
This is why cancer is so likely in smokers. Ultimately, smoking is uniquely dangerous among the things you are legally allowed to do. The average smoker loses 10 years of life, which means that some lose like 5 years and others more like 25.
I'm glad they pointed that out, because there's a lot of these studies about things taking X number of years off your life. It's really just a probability function, like getting cancer to begin with. This even comes up sometimes with estimating the deaths of Chernobyl from cancer. Very difficult to do, because there's so many factors, like those individuals could be smokers. They could have lived downwind of a really nasty coal plant that is continuously spitting out toxic chemicals and radioactive chemicals that they live downwind of, because let's face it, the Soviet Union in the 1980s didn't exactly set any records for air quality.
You don't know which one will be you, but it cuts into your health span even more, making a much larger part of your life spent being chronically sick. Oof. So why don't smokers not just stop doing it? Smokers are often seen as unhinged or without discipline, which is unfair. Nicotine is one of the most physically and psychologically addictive substances known to humanity.
Made a bad decision, and
if you ever
are suffering the consequences for way too long, which is very sad.
Start using it, you'll likely struggle with it for the rest of your life. The physical addiction lasts around 3 days, but the psychological addiction is much harder to overcome because you form strong habits and it's connected to many social cues, like hanging out with friends or winding down from work. The perverse thing is that almost everybody who starts smoking as a teenager. The tobacco industry has to target vulnerable brains and get them hooked on the pleasurable effects of nicotine, or it would go away.
At least within the U.S., there's so many restrictions out there for where tobacco can even advertise. Like, you're not going to see it on TV. I've yet to see it on any ads, say on YouTube or any other social media platforms. I think the last place I actually saw an ad was in a magazine. Looked at a magazine in a very long time.
Today, about 1 billion people will light a cigarette, which is a lot, but at least the trends are looking good. In 2000, 34% of adults were smoking.
Wow, that
In 2020, it was only 23%. Still, in 2023, about 8
I think their link said tobacco products. That includes, chewing, that sort of thing.
million people died from it. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are many successful strategies for quitting. We've put links to some in the video description.
Oh, that's nice of them.
People who stop smoking by the age of 35 on average don't die earlier than non-smokers. If you're older than that, even quitting late can add years to your life.
I'm going to go ahead and copy those links into the description of my video too if you're struggling.
It's a bit like with climate change. Every bit counts, even if damage has already been done. We're not the morality or health police, you do you. But at least be aware what exactly you're doing and why you're doing it. Most of you watching this don't smoke, so, well, just maybe never try it. Smoking only really solves a temporary problem, but it creates loads of permanent ones.
Kind of like resorting to installing coal power plants, like one going up every day in China, rather than investing more in nuclear power plants that are a lot more sustainable and cause less of an adverse effect in terms of air pollution.
Problem, but it creates loads of permanent ones.
I had a feeling that Kurzgesagt would make anti-smoking. I still felt a bit triggered by the initial title, but I'm glad I watched that one. Thank you very much for the recommendations. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.